what's up? Welcome back. We got a hot, fresh interview for. Oh, shit. We'll try that one more time. Hey. Welcome back. We've got an awesome interview for you today. I am your host, Sunny D.
And I'm Captain J.
And we're the Pot Smoking Moms. We talked to the wonderful Liz Thompson. It was pretty interesting talking to her about the research and just kind of all of the
Red tape
obstacles that they have to get through to do the research. Because, we think, oh, we're rescheduling it. It's going to be different now, right? Well, no, it takes time. And so we do talk about how difficult it is. But she's currently doing a clinical trial funded by the NFL. You know that it's two of Jay's favorite things.
Weed and NFL.
Exactly.
It's basically clinical trial to examine reducing neuroinflammation and concussion pain with cannabinoid molecules. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting.
Yeah. So if you're interested in all of that, stick around. Here's our interview with Liz Thompson.
Hey, Liz, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're very excited to have you on the show. I actually encountered your page through Dr. Miyabi Shields, and that's how I found you. And I immediately got super excited when I saw it because, one, I'm a huge football fan. Two, I'm a huge cannabis fan. And three, I'm a big believer in the healing of cannabis and how it can be very helpful to these players. So I was like, we got to have her on the show immediately when I saw you're involved in their clinical trial. But before we get into all that, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the cannabis field, and then we'll get into the clinical field.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Liz Thompson, and I'm currently a PhD candidate in cannabinoid pharmacology. So my background is my undergraduate degree within microbiology and genetics, and then I have a master's degree in applied physiology. So I worked a lot with patients looking, using molecular mechanisms to look at systems. And so in humans, in patients, we were sort of looking at how you can affect systems with physiology. So outside of using a pharmaceutical, so just what can you do with your body to sort of heal your body using different things. And so the endocannabinoid system really fits into that nicely because your endocannabinoid system is influenced by so many things like exercise, diet, meditation. Like we know now that we're pulling the levers in the endocannabinoid system by doing so many things that, people in the past were like, oh, that's just woo woo. It's like, no, it's not. There's physiology. Like we have a lot of science behind it now to show what's happening. So I think culturally people have always known that these things worked, but now we have the technology to prove it out. And so so cannabis just really fit naturally into physiology that I was already looking at. And I didn't know anything about the endocannabinoid system, but I knew about molecular mechanisms. And so I'm from Canada. And so cannabis is federally legal there since 2018. And so it's, culturally, it's always sort of been a thing there and it's been allowed since 2018. So then I didn't really want to go back and do a PhD, but I was just really, really interested in this because the way I actually even came about it was I was looking at the opioid receptors and I came across research that suggested that you could use cannabinoid molecules to reduce the amount of morphine equivalents that you need to have the same pain reduction efficacy come out. And I was like, well, that's crazy. How would that work? And then I went down like a 10-year rabbit hole looking at the molecular mechanisms to actually see how does the mu receptor interact with, the CB1 receptor. But anyways, a long story short, I saw the NFL put up money for looking. And so my personal focus was always on neuroinflammation in the brain because my husband was an athlete, my kids are athletes, I was an athlete, and I've seen, the downstream effects of concussion and the downstream effects of inflammation. And I've also seen the downstream effects of opioid addictions and a lot of athletes using opioids and they're exposed to injury and opioids and stuff just in their demographic. And so I was really interested in looking for better ways. Like there have to be better ways that we can help athletes with things that don't have very good pharmacological, solutions right now. And concussion is one of them. We don't have any pharmacological options. And so to me, I started looking at cannabis and I was like, when you look at the molecular mechanisms of how cannabis works in your brain, it actually makes a lot of sense. And we do have a lot of published research in preclinical, animal studies and also in petri dish studies and stuff showing how it works. And so I started to think like, why aren't athletes using this, And so I said to my supervisor, like, I think there's something there. I really want to look at it. And the NFL hadn't put their call up for research yet. And I had just got accepted by him to do my PhD to look at neuroinflammation in the brain. And it was just a couple months later that I was outside actually watering the first cannabis plant I ever grew. And it came across my phone and I was like, Patrick, check it out. The NFL is putting up money for neuroinflammation in the brain. And he was like, okay, we're going to apply. And like, I didn't actually, that's not even why I was showing him. I just thought it was so cool that they were actually putting up money for it. And he's like, okay, well, we're going to apply. So then I was like, we are? Okay. So he went and he's been a physiologist, for years, 25, 30 years. He's a concussion specialist and he's worked with athletes that entire time looking at, brain trauma and how your heart and brain are interactive, the autonomic nervous system and stuff. So he went and he gathered his colleagues in all of these different disciplines to put in this amazing research proposal to the NFL. And so we have, pain specialists, neurologists, we have pharmacokineticists, we have we're looking at blood draws. We're doing so many different things. But so he applied, he put it in, and I think there were 110 different research teams that put in to try to get selected. And we did end up getting selected after we went through the NIH adjudication. It was us and one other group that got selected by the NFL to then go ahead with what we had proposed, which was a clinical trial to actually use cannabinoid molecules in an athletic population and do a comparison study. So we're going to do a double-blind placebo-controlled study to see the difference in the athletes that are using cannabinoid molecules versus the athletes that aren't when they're in season, in a season of football, actually. And so really the end game for me has always been to reduce the neuroinflammation in the brain, because we know that that leads to neurodegenerative problems down the road, like when the athletes have retired, 10, 20 years down the road. And so to try to see, is this something that we can use in athletes like to use cannabis anyways. So is this something, can we come up with the data to show that yes, they're onto something, like this is not a myth, so we really, that was sort of where I came from and why I'm on this project right now.
So when you say athletes using cannabinoid molecules, what do you mean by that? Is it just CBD? Are you looking at all the different, possible cannabinoids they may be using for treatment, whether they smoke cannabis or they just use topicals? Like, what is it that you're looking at exactly?
Yeah. So in this particular research study, and that's where I've learned a lot about doing clinical trials, and that's where it's very, very difficult to do a clinical trial in cannabis or cannabinoid molecules because it is federally scheduled as a narcotic in the US. Mm-hmm. And so we're in Canada, I was thinking, okay, well, we're in Canada, it's federally legal, so like this shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, I was very wrong. They still make you jump through flaming hoops. And so in order to do a clinical trial, you have to be able to show every single molecule that's in whatever formula you're going to use. You have to have like stability tests on it, brochures, like you have to have a lot of, toxicology, pharmacology. And so initially I wanted to do, I'm like, oh no, we got to do full spectrum. We got to, like, there's no way we can't do an isolate, that'd be garbage, whatever. But we couldn't, Health Canada or the FDA, but we're doing it in Canada. It's so difficult to get them to approve each single molecule that right now in this study, in the first phase, we have to do a dose escalation study because we don't even actually have that in CBD. We've never actually done a dose escalation study in a healthy population, which is kind of crazy when you think about, we sell CBD to everywhere, to all kinds of people, right? And we know that it's very, very safe. And Epidiolex, which is a medication that's used for pediatric children, it's just CBD. That's all that it is a CBD isolate, really. Well, it's an extract, but so it's very, very safe. But in order for us to get through and get our no objection letter from Health Canada, this particular study right now in the beginning is a dose escalation study, and then we'll find the best dose from that. And then that dose is what we're going to use in the second part, which is the in-season football. So it's just CBD right now, just a CBD isolate. But then the third part of the study, we're going to take that and we're going to add THC to it. And then we're looking at the pain reduction and also sort of the reversal of post-concussion and some neurodegenerative disorders in pain patients that are already experiencing pain. So, but in order to do the clinical trial, we had to have the pharmacology and the pharmacokinetics done first, which is the dose escalation, because we don't even really know what the optimal dose is. Like, you know, it's all over. When you ask people what's the optimal dose of CBD, nobody really knows. Everybody kind of thinks some people are like super, super high dose. Some people are super, super low dose. Some people are like, why am I bothering with CBD? I just like THC, forget about it. Like, so, you know, for me, if I was going to be able to design it myself and design like the actual formulation that I would put in athletes, or even ones that I have recommended to athletes, it certainly wouldn't have been a CBD isolate, but I am very grateful to the NFL for allowing us to do this clinical trial, because it's basically a starting point.
Yeah.
And so then we can build on that. But, you know, cannabis research is super frustrating, because you look at this, it's like, okay, so you're going to make me, and we have to go through all of these things to get you to approve this. Yet I can literally walk out this door and I can walk into the dispensary that's 8 feet away from me, and I can purchase a combination of however many cannabinoids, and we take them all the time, right? And that's like, and you're selling it to people. So why are you making this so difficult? Like, you should be making this as easy as possible for us to study, to get you the data that you should have already had, you know, or don't
which is ridiculous to me, because don't you want to have tests and research on the things that are going to be on the market that you fought us tooth and nail to
You
not
would think
have?
so.
Exactly.
Right.
That's the thing. Every day I'm like, this is so freaking stupid. Like, it's so frustrating. You know, sometimes I'm like, why did I even decide that I wanted? But it was, you know, when I went back to do my PhD, I'm like, I don't want to because it's a lot of work. Like, graduate school is a lot of work. And I was like, I'm not going to do this much work for something that's not going to make a difference. And so for me, because I think that I know athletes use cannabis, and I know that they want to use it as an equal, you know, it should be an equal option. Like, if that's what they want to use for, say, pain killing, then that should be an equal option when they go to their team doctor to say, like, I want to use cannabis versus I want to use tramadol or whatever you're trying to give me. Like, I just want this to be an equal option, instead of a, no, you can't use that, but here, take these pills instead, right? That should not be happening anymore. But in order for us to change that, we have to produce the data, because the way that these policymakers in sports change it is they need the data. And that's actually how the NFL even put the money up at all, was because the players were like, get cannabis off the prohibited list. And the NBA did. The NBA has completely dropped it. It is not on their prohibited list at all. THC, anything, it's not prohibited. And yep, and that's good. And then the NFL was like, okay, well, we want you to, the players were saying, like, drop it. And the league was saying, well, we don't have the data. So the players said, well, get the data then. Like, it's, you know, we don't have the data has become just a really bad excuse to keep a bad policy in place. And when you look at what's going on around us in the world, like, it's accessible to people. And to your point, shouldn't you want this data? Like, why are you creating so many barriers? They're trying to make it fit into the pharma model that is the model that was created for monomolecular drugs to be studied. Cannabis is not a monomolecular drug. It's a polypharmaceutical. Like, the cannabis plant, and even one molecule from the cannabis plant hits millions and like so many different receptors and pathways that it's like, why are we trying to shove it into this box that we created for monomolecular pharmaceuticals? It's not that, but they're trying to make it fall under that. And Canada's done a little bit of work trying to create different pathways to being able to study it. So they actually created a therapeutic lane. So if you're ever studying a clinical population, which is like a sick population, now it's a clinical trial. So then you have to go through all these additional things. But they actually created kind of a lane for therapeutic uses, which is when you're giving whatever product, natural product or otherwise, if you're giving it to a healthy population, then it's a different set of requirements. So Canada actually did create a lane for that for cannabis and cannabinoid molecules about a year ago, but we were already halfway into our application. And so I was like, yes, we can go in the therapeutic route. And they were like, no, you can't, because you're already halfway in. So you guys have to go. Yeah. So it's, but you know, it's a start, and I'm grateful for them, but it's just the research. Like, there's so many frustrating things about research that I think a lot of people don't really see on the outside of, you know, just how frustrating. And research is expensive, right? And when you think about product makers, They don't need research to sell their product. They can sell whatever they want with no data behind it because that's the system that we've created, right? So they actually, why would they put money in for research? They literally don't need to, because as long as they get their SKU number and they can sell it. So the people that want to, the people that will eventually pony up the money to do it is going to be the pharma companies. And that's kind of sad, but
the recommendation that they're trying to reschedule cannabis from 1 to 3, is that going to help in any way with research? Is it going to make it any way easier? Is it going to create new barriers that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see where that goes, because you would think, like, in Canada, it's descheduled completely. It's not even in a Schedule 3. It's in descheduled. Like, you would think that it would be Shangri-La in Canada, but it's not. Like, they still have these really tough, things and policies and stuff. And like, you would think, okay, well, being federally legal there, like, a lot of times people think, oh, well, if we could just deschedule it, like, they would stop testing at work and they would stop testing and all these things. That's not true. Like, in Canada, now Canada's a little bit different, but because our government, like, a lot of things that are federally funded, they still test for cannabis there. So it's still, I mean, even though it's federally legal, which makes zero sense, because are you testing for beer? Like, you're not. So these kids now, they can't even go and apply for these jobs that they want to do because there's cannabis tests, and they're like, wait, what? And it's like, we made our own mistakes in Canada, but in the States, yeah, I think they, technically, in theory, moving it into Schedule 3 is supposed to help for research. But when you actually look through the document of the recommendations, the really long document that came out, there's hardly any mention of what they're going to do for research. So it'll be really interesting to see in reality how much change that makes for research. I don't know. I really don't know. I hope it makes it easier, because it's sure difficult to get anything done now. But
I mean, they're trying to push it to seem like it's going to open some kind of doors, but a lot of us in the community are like, this isn't enough. It's the
no,
dangling carrot. It's about that time when the presidential race is up
yes,
again, and that's what they're doing. And it's like
yeah,
they talk about this the entire time they're in office. They bring it up and, oh, hey, yeah, I believe in this, but it's like it doesn't really happen because it doesn't benefit them
right,
directly. They have to figure out a way to make it work for them before they ever say, okay, have
yeah.
at it.
Yeah. And I think
And
that actually, like, when, because when I worked before in clinical physiology, like, involved in that is really being familiar with the way the pharmaceutical company and the pharmaceutical setup works. And so I personally think, and this is just my own 2 cents, I think that the reason why any of this conversation is even coming up right now is because they know how they can position it now, where the right people, i.e. pharma or whoever, are going to be able to make the most amount of money off it. They've always known that cannabis is safe. I mean, the US government held patents on it, for crying out loud. The same government that was saying that there was no medical use or medical indication for cannabis literally simultaneously held patents on cannabis use for neuroinflammation and antioxidation. Like, they've always known this. And so watching them move the pieces on the board, you almost know what's going to happen, because why would you put it in Schedule 3? Why wouldn't you just deschedule it? Well, there's a reason, right? Because Schedule 3 is right into a prescription setup, and whatever that's going to look like, who knows? But there's definitely additional regulations to a Schedule 3 than there would be to just descheduling it. And so, yeah, I don't know. And also, there are other things that are in that Schedule 3, like ketamine and, tramadol. So, like, if it becomes a Schedule 3, well, then you can't treat it any differently than all the other Schedule 3s, because then that wouldn't be right either. So it'll be super interesting to see what happens. But I mean, they write the rules, right? That's why we're in this stupid place in the beginning. In 1937, when they decided to make it illegal after it had been used for thousands and thousands of years, they just turned it on its head overnight, right? Like, it's these policymakers, and they do so much more damage than the plant ever could have done.
Mhm.
It's these policymakers, and they're being put in place by people that don't even understand the plant. They don't understand the culture. They don't understand why people use it. They don't understand that it has layering effects and that it has all these different cannabinoids. Like they are not even educated in it, but they're politicians and they're lobbyists and they're people that they want to move their pieces on the board. And yeah, so I don't know, that one will be really interesting to see, but it's not going to happen overnight either, right? Like we're at least a year away from even that moving. Like even if they did say, okay, the 90-day comment period is over, whatever, it's still going to take at least another year for that to even change. So for right now, nothing changes, and we all can smash our head against the wall trying to do research.
It was just a headline grab. That's all it was,
Oh,
really.
totally. And for votes, right? I mean, it was
100.
predictable. Like, all the people that were following it were like, yeah, Q2, and they'll make some big announcement. And then there it was, Q2, the big announcement, like, oh yeah, we're going to reschedule it. But I think it's only really people that pay attention that understand that, like, putting it in Schedule 3, that's not a home run. And that's not even necessarily anything to celebrate, because that just
Yeah.
gets them involved, where before they were totally hands off. But now they're going to be hands on in some way, because there's other things that are regulated in that same category. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. We don't either.
Yeah,
It's so frustrating. It really is so frustrating because you could see the motives. It's like it's so
totally.
clear.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
they can still keep people incarcerated for it, and people still will go
yes.
to jail for it, and that's a big, fat, huge part of the problem to begin with.
Yeah, that's a big
But
part of the
anyways,
problem, because generationally they've caused these problems. Like when you look at, their failed war on drugs, it's like, look at all the problems that's caused generations of families because of something that the government put in place, Um, and I think that anybody would be wise to even look into the history of cannabis and how that even happened. And once you start to look at that, it really gives you a wide-eyed view of a lot of
Mhm.
other things that are going on around you. And so I always, encourage people, look into the history of cannabis and how it even became illegal in the first place, and then start thinking of other things around you, you know, that may have potentially been down the same road. Like it's then you start to see, like a lot of people aren't even aware. They don't know the history of cannabis at all. Like they don't know it's been culturally used for thousands of years. They don't, it's just turned into this big political thing. But for
They
me, for
only know the
athletes,
demonizing of the last
right, right.
100 years or
They,
whatever, the stigma
yeah,
story that
yeah,
they've told us all. Yeah.
yeah. And by design, right? Like that's the
Mhm.
story that they rammed into everybody's head in school, and this big dare project and everything. And so now, like, one of my big focuses really is it's re-educating people. Like literally everything that you think you know is wrong. And so when I talk to doctors and stuff, and so to be able to have a conversation with them about molecular mechanisms and science and stuff, so that they can understand, um, most of them don't even know why they think what they think. It's like, where did you get your information from? Because they don't learn anything about the endocannabinoid system or
I
cannabis
know.
in medical
It's
school at
crazy.
all, right?
Well, the ETS really was a late discovery, and then they just never really decided to teach any of the doctors about it. They're like, well, we already decided that's not good for us. So,
Right.
you
It's
know,
which is crazy, because it literally is involved in almost every pathology in your body in one way or another. The endocannabinoid system is involved in there, right? Like it's a master regulator. And so that's one of the things, like in Canada, I think that maybe because we're 5 years now into being federally legal, I think that is one thing that, we've tried to find places to educate, but I mean, we have not done a good job by any means. But it's like we're at least at the place now where, you know, I can say to my supervisors, like, can we create some curriculum to start teaching this to undergraduate students and stuff? Because like they need to know, like we need to educate somebody. The doctors don't want to know about it, and they didn't ask to be the gatekeepers of cannabis, so fair enough. But we need to have somebody, like we need
Mhm.
to have people that are able to help patients. And then for me, it's athletes, really. It's like the athletics, because like my own daughter, she's an athlete. And so why in the NCAA, if you're a girl and you have, premenstrual cramps, which all girls deal with, and you want to use cannabis because it actually works, but you can't because you might lose your scholarship, you might get kicked out. But here, you can take this NSAID or you can take this other painkiller and you'll be fine. But it's like, right, so we're just going to keep pumping them full of NSAIDs till their liver falls out. Like, it's just, to me, that's offensive. Like, these athletes want to take care of their body. And if they feel like cannabis is the thing that is going to help them do that, then why is it treated any differently than these other drugs and other pharmaceuticals that you will happily tell them to go and take? You know, we have enough data, we have enough safety information, you know, at least at a basic level. But on top of that, it's like, we need to educate them so that they know that, so that the trainers know that, so that the medical staff knows that. And the NCAA now they've tabled removing cannabis from the prohibited list, which I really hope they do. They're having their last meeting in June. And so in September, it will most likely come off the prohibition list, which is great. But then it's like, well, you know, who's going to help them when they want to use it? Because it can be a great therapeutic, and there's optimal ways to use it. And again, it's layered and you can do so many different things with it because there's so many different bioactive molecules in the plant that, like, it's a cheat code for a lot of good things.
And tell us more about some of the therapeutic ways that athletes can use cannabis. I mean, I've thought of the obvious, obviously, de-stress and relaxation after being hit, pain, inflammation, like for inflammation and stuff. But like, what are the different ways that athletes can use cannabis to be beneficial for them?
Yeah, so those are the obvious ones, of course. Like, and another one that's a really obvious one is recovery. So like, they want to use it for recovery because it reduces the inflammation. So again, where we're lacking is the human data to show this. And that's why we want to produce this clinical trial data. So right now it's anecdotal, but what athletes find by using it, and they're not doing anything illegal. They are perfectly within their rights if they're adult age to buy it. Like, nobody's doing anything illegal. And in Canada, we actually don't have a problem with our athletes using it because in youth sport, which is the equivalent of the NCAA, they're allowed to use cannabis there. It's not prohibited. It got taken out. So whatever. If that's what they want to use, they can. So recovery is one place that anecdotally they find that they can recover faster after a game because it does reduce the inflammation. But some of the other places are sleep. Like, they need to get to sleep. If they're in a tournament or they're in, 2-week, championships or whatever, if they've been traveling, the jet lag, it can help you get to sleep and sort of reset your circadian rhythm. But then also performance anxiety. Like, athletes get anxiety. You have 100,000 people screaming at you. That can invoke a lot of anxiety. And we know that cannabinoids can work on your 5-HT1A receptor, which is like serotonin receptor, right? It can help with anxiety. And it doesn't mean you have to take it before the game, but if you're taking some cannabinoids just consistently, it can really help with that to keep it at a level, so that you're not freaking out when you get on the field. Another one is motion sickness. Like, people don't really think a lot about. Athletes have to travel. They have to travel on the bus. They have to travel on the plane. And a lot of the data that we look at on motion sickness, it's your endocannabinoid system that is like deficient. And so if you can use cannabinoids to support your endocannabinoid system, you can almost nick motion sickness right in the butt by, if you just take, CBD or CBG. And so that's a big one. Yeah. So, and then there's, of course, the pain, there's obviously the pain reduction, the inflammation reduction. And then the big one that is near and dear to my heart is the neuroinflammation in the brain. So when you look at where your cannabis receptors are in your brain, they're both on the neurons, which when you get smashed in the head, your neurons start firing, right? And there is a receptor on the nerve that you can hit with THC to just kind of calm it down and stop it from like firing out of control. But the other thing that happens is when that nerve is totally firing, you have something called microglial cells in your brain, and that's like the resident immune cells in your brain. When your nerve starts freaking out, those start freaking out. So your microglial cells like go into a pro-inflammatory state, and they have the CB2 receptor on it, which is another cannabinoid receptor. And if you hit that, it also flips it back into an anti-inflammatory state. So now you just calm the entire thing down. And in concussion, why we know there's neurodegenerative disorder down the road is because these things just keep on freaking out, and it's a feed forward loop. And if you don't have enough of your own endocannabinoids secreted to hit those receptors and calm it down, well, it makes a lot of sense that you could come in with plant molecules that mimic your own molecules to hit those receptors and help calm it down. And we do have great animal data showing that. Like I mean, for the animal lovers, like put on your earmuffs, but like we can conk mice in the head, and we watch their endocannabinoids start secreting. There's an increase in those endocannabinoids because what the job is to hit the receptors and calm down the inflammation. And so if they're deficient in the ability to do that, the inflammation isn't calmed down. And so if you think about it in theory, the theory would make sense that if you can provide what you need to help calm that down, then that would be a massive win for athletes, for military, for anybody that's like got any kind of neuroinflammation. And that's maybe one of the reasons why, we know in epilepsy, CBD can work to cut some of the misfiring. That's why Epidiolex works, because it's changing the charges in your brain, really. So yeah, that's a big one. And I think for concussion, it could be a really powerful thing to be able to show in athletes, because that's one place that we just don't really have a good solution. And like, there's only so many ways you can redesign a helmet and a mouth guard. Like, I mean, we've put in zillions of dollars, and this is making like, come on, guys.
And only so many rules you can change to the game to try to prevent concussions, but they're still going to freaking happen because it's a contact sport.
Right. And we shouldn't want to change the game either. It's like, no, we want to play. Like, guys want to play. They want to play the sport. They want to play the sport the way it is. So, yes, they try to penalize the head contact and stuff. Fine. But like, we want the game to stay the same, but there's other ways that we can do some things to help protect them. And I do think that cannabinoid molecules are definitely a way that'll make an impact. And that's one of the things that we're going to look at. And we're already looking at is the changes in your brain. So the cerebral blood flow, so how the blood flow actually changes in your brain, and then also the cerebral oxygenation. So how much oxygen are you getting to your brain, and does that increase when you're using CBD? Because in theory, yes, like it actually helps with things like that. So, and then with that kind of data, that can ripple out into other neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, MS. They all have common denominators. Like those microglial cells that I was talking about, the immune cells in your brain, those are a common denominator of every single neurodegenerative disorder that we know of. All show microglia in a pro-inflammatory state. And they all show an upregulation of the CB2 receptor on those microglia, which is a cannabinoid receptor. So we know that when that's going crazy, it's creating more and more receptors. So if we can give it what it needs to hit those receptors and calm it down, that's a whole host of things that we could potentially affect by getting into that, the pharmacology of that.
Every time we have new guests and we talk and we learn more and more about the ECS system and what it does, it never ceases to amaze me. It's absolutely, it's crazy. It's crazy. It really does keep us balanced in a homeostasis. And it's like, it just makes me so angry.
I agree. I was so mad when I discovered we even had, but I'm like, hold up. I got through 2 degrees and I never even heard about this. I was livid because then when I started learning more, and I really was like, I'm a total nerd on molecular mechanisms. Like I knew lots of them and then I was like, wait. And then once I started looking at it, everything in every other dimension just made so much more sense when you see, because it's a neuroregulator, like it regulates your nerves, but it's also an immunoregulator. So it also regulates your immune system. So if you think of everything in your body that has to do with either your nerves firing, like pain, or even, mental state and emotions, like all those neurotransmitters, that's controlling a lot of things. So you got that. And then you have your immune system, which is controlling inflammation and pain also, and all these other things. It's like, well, those are the 2 places where your cannabinoid receptors are. That's a shit ton of things that you can affect if you can get in there and figure out which one of those buttons to push. And in your brain, I think there's a lot of things to do, in your brain now. When we look at the neuroscience of what's going on in your brain, I think a lot of things have to do with neuroinflammation. So, even, autism, there's a lot of brain inflammation and things like that. And so when you see people and the patients anecdotally that cannabis works for, it makes a lot of sense. It's like, well, yeah, I guess that would make a lot of sense, because if you're getting into the places that they're potentially deficient in, and you're supplying them with the things that they need, and then you're seeing behavioral outcomes that are either, you know, becoming better or they're less agitated, well, it just makes sense, you know? So now it's just how to connect the dots and to produce that, to publish it, you know, in the publications under a science, you know, the scientific rigor that you require to actually prove it out. That's more difficult, but I'm just happy that it's available to everybody. You know, now we can access it. And so sometimes I'm like, whatever, my supervisors always, you know, because I'm like, well, out here in the wild, we're just using this and we're doing this, you know, because then in research, you know, everything has to be so this, that. And I'm like, okay, well, whatever, because out here in the real world, we're just going to keep doing this. And, you know, but I'm happy for that,
because we've known for thousands of years that it's worked. And,
yeah,
you know, even though it's been not inaccessible and illegal before, people were still using cannabis medicine in the shadows, and they're
right. Yeah. And that's the thing where it's like, you know, I just want to get to the place where it doesn't have to be in the shadows, right? It's like nobody's doing, and especially in Canada, nobody's doing anything illegal here, right? Like, why are we still treating this like it's the devil's lettuce or something? It's like, it's federally legal. It's on every corner. So, you know, to change the conversation from one that it's like, oh, you know, people hiding in a corner trying to like hide, why not be seen? Like, you know, let people know that it works for you and the different things that it works for, you know, because that'll teach people that, you know, because people have this weird idea that, oh, well, medical patients just want to get high. That's not true. I work with them all the time. They actually prefer not to get high. They want to function. You know, they just want to be out of pain, or they want to be out of anxiety, or they want less depression, or they want less motion sickness, or like, it's like actually the last thing they're after is getting high. But if they want to get high, okay, what's wrong with that? Sometimes that's fun too. Like, who, you know, why is it any different than someone drinking? Like in athletics, that's one of my biggest pet peeves is, you know, when somebody wins the Olympics or when they win a championship, they can run down the street with like beers in every hand, or, you know, drink their face off, cracking the bottles and the champagne's going everywhere. And, you know, that's accepted and it's actually encouraged. But Michael Phelps is seen with a bong and he loses all his sponsorships.
It's ridiculous.
Like, make that make sense. And on top of that, the guy just won 8 gold medals. So why are we thinking that this is bad? He's like superhuman. If anything, that's proof that it doesn't damage you. Like, what? But
like Sha'Carri Richardson, like her not being able to compete in the Olympics.
Yes,
that was insane. Like, and what is the idea of like, oh, it's a performance enhancing drug? It can't be a performance enhancing drug and a laser stoner drug at the same time. Like,
right. Yeah. And, you know, and for her too, it's like, okay, so, you know, she said, well, she used it because her mother had passed, you know, and she was had depression with that. And that's an acceptable use for it. And so if she had used a different medication like Prozac, she would have been allowed to compete. So why is that the way that it is? That should be an option for her to use that, just like using any other prescription antidepressant should be. You can't pick and choose which one, you know, should be better or acceptable than the other. But when you look at the Olympics and WADA, like how they come up with those things, it's really kind of sketchy because there's 3 qualifications for things to get like banned. And one is if it's performance enhancing, one at which like, no, cannabis is not performance enhancing directly. 2, if it's a damage to the athlete, okay, well, that's a no also. But 3 is if it goes against the spirit of sport. And that's the one that ends up getting pretty much everything, but it's such a shady thing because it's like, what are you basing that
general
on? Like,
yeah, exactly. Like, who's the judge of that?
Exactly. And it allows them to play the moral police is what it does. Right. It's like, so now you're just going to be the moral police on anything that you say goes against the spirit of sport. And so for them, what they were, you know, I think their biggest argument to being against the spirit of sport was because it was federally illegal. And because it was federally illegal, now you're doing something illegal. So that by proxy is against the spirit of sport. Well, that times are changing. Like, it's not illegal in Canada now. So it's not against the spirit of sport. And actually, how is alcohol not against the spirit of sport then? I mean, it's not illegal, but it is. It's a total
It's all,
excuse.
it's all
Yeah.
it's whatever's convenient for them.
Yes.
They're running out of ways to make this
Yeah.
convenient for them because we're all starting to see why it was made illegal in the first place. So it's all
Exactly.
about what if they pick and choose. They always
Yeah.
pick and choose. And this is a
Yeah.
prime example of that.
It is, and it's so frustrating. Like it's but I am actually a little bit encouraged because I do think the narrative is changing, and that's one thing that if they move it into Schedule 3, and it was almost immediate, like it was actually crazy because for a long time, you know, even talking about cannabis in sports or that it should be, it should be considered the same way as any other medication is if we're looking at it for therapeutics or whatever, for a long time that was looked at like, are you insane? And it was almost overnight when they said that they were going to put it in Schedule 3 because now that they have admitted, yes, there are medicinal properties to it, almost overnight it was like, this is a great idea, let's talk about this now, what else can I do? And it was like, this is so crazy that people just allow those political designations to control their opinions, but I think people, they're afraid of the stigma and they're afraid of the judgment. But I am encouraged because if it is in Schedule 3, then at least the doctors will listen. And now, because they just listen to whatever is, put in their head, now that it goes to Schedule 3 and it says it has an acceptable medical use, well, now maybe they will want to know more about what could that possibly be. Whereas before they were like, no, the government says it doesn't. And they just believed the government for whatever reason. But like now that government's saying it does, then, maybe they'll listen. And then maybe it will one day be able to be seen in the same way that all those other pharmaceuticals are that we use for other things, right? I mean, patients get great results, and quite frankly, it has a better safety profile than probably 90% of some of those things that have been made and given to people, which we have no long-term data on either. Like yeah.
It's so ass backwards.
It is. It's so backwards. But again, at least we're able to access it. We can get it and we can use it when we want.
Baby step.
Yeah. And so I just really try to, educate people, and hopefully they'll ask questions and not be afraid to talk about it because, when you can talk about it with people, just to even get them thinking, like just get them asking questions, right? Then they can start to look at it in a totally different perspective, which I think will be helpful for everybody, just to progress the whole movement to, and another thing, like in my PhD, part of my project was actually interviewing a lot of professional athletes or their medical training staff about cannabis and cannabis use and what they think of it. And, I think that the way that the rules are right now, and I'm going to publish my data on this, I'm working on getting it ready to publish, but athletes don't need any additional reasons to worry or feel like they're doing something wrong or that they're mischievous in some way, right? Like, why do they have to harbor that? If that's what they choose to use for, say, sleep, why should they have to feel like they're doing something wrong by choosing cannabis instead of a sleep aid like Ambien, right? Like it's this perception, the societal perception, and then they harbor it inside them and it makes them feel bad. It makes them feel like they're doing something bad. That's not fair to them. And if it was so bad, why are we selling it to everybody? Like why it's allowed, but it's just that society is portraying it now just in this other light. And so that it's hard for the athletes that want to use it as their medication. And so one place that I'm really trying to focus is to change that conversation so that it is something that is seen as an equal to any other thing that they're using, either pharmacologically, or athletes go out and party all the time too. Like, let's be real, they love to rip it up. And when you look at the difference between somebody that goes out on a Saturday night and drinks 16 beers or the ones that go out and just smoke a bowl or something, the next day looks vastly different. For the ones that went out and got totally liquored up, the next day is a total write-off. They can't train, they can't function, they're puking, they're dehydrated. The guys that decided to use cannabis most likely went to sleep. And then they woke up the next day and they are ready to go. And they're probably, their inflammation's down. They feel great. They have no anxiety. They get up the next day. They can train. they feel good, nothing hurts. So like when you even just
when they go train.
Yes, right.
You want them
So
to
when you
train and be 100% when they're training.
yes.
What consumption method is most popular or more recommended among athletes?
Well, so for athletes, the one that you would recommend probably wouldn't be inhaled just because they need their lungs, right? So we want to stay away from that. That's not to say that they don't use it. I think a lot of them do inhale it because that's what they're looking for. But I mean, when you're looking at ways to recommend it to them, you can do an oral mucosal like a tincture, and of course topical. A lot of them love the topical application, but I would say by and large, most of them inhale. They smoke it. But for athletes, they would want to be careful with that just because they need their lung capacity, right? And so if it's giving them like bronchial, if it's tickling their throat and stuff. But I mean, the good thing about cannabis is there's so many different ways that you can take it. And even and in some senses, actually, like, when you inhale it, that's a more acute, impact. So you inhale it and it's right there. But when you look at the pharmacokinetics of actually taking like a tincture or even an edible, you can hold a consistent, you can have some consistent serum levels of it. And actually that has sort of been found prophylactically to even be more beneficial for keeping the inflammation down, is to have sort of a consistent dosing of it. And so the difference with athletes, though, another thing too, is because you really have to walk a line between, because you don't want to mess up your reaction time, your cognitive decision making in a game, your balance, things like that. And so it's really, when you're looking at using it therapeutically in athletics, and it's a special population because they still need to be aware that their performance, that's the most important thing to them, is they want to perform. And so, they want to use it in a way that's not going to hinder the things that make them elite as an athlete. They want to use it, but that is how they're using it. They're not using it in a way like no athlete. I mean, athletes are chronic about, if you think about it, their body is their most valuable tool. It's their body. And so they're not doing things to hurt their body on purpose, especially pros. I mean, there are $1 million on the line here. These contracts are enormous. And if your body fails you, the contract's gone. So they are not doing things at all to think that it's going to hurt them, right? So they want to use it in a way that's actually going to help and prolong their career. And so with cannabinoids, you can use it in a way that does help with things like that, by ratioing and your dose, spreading out your dosing and stuff, and figuring out ways that it works for you. And everybody's super different, right? Like, and it's different. Even when you look at the science, like there's some publications coming out now, when you look at body composition, because your blood volume changes. So even, athletes that are super shredded or ripped, they have a lot less fat. And so they have more blood volume. So then the cannabinoids are more diluted in their serum, right? So like they're different population, and everybody's a different population, right? Like even a body that's exercising, your metabolism changes and things happen there that when you're at rest, they don't happen there. So it's just the same as any other supplements or anything else, just to sort of figure out how can you make it work for you. But I think that maybe the conversation is getting to the place now where if the NCAA changes their rule, I think that would be a really big one, and an opening for athletes to start to find a way to use it therapeutically, which is how they're trying to use it, because right now you have like the rec industry. So that's like the Saturday night, whatever your choice, you choose your, whatever you want to do on Saturday night, and athletes are using it there for sure. And then you have your medical application for people that are sick, epileptics or whatever, but they fall in the middle. Like they're a therapeutic population, that they're not sick. They're well, they're actually like superhuman, most of them, and they're choosing to use it for something that's trying to optimize themselves. So that's a completely different thing than someone who is sick with a pathology that they're trying to help, which it is very helpful in a lot of pathologies, or somebody that's going out to rip it up on a Saturday night. Those are different, right? Like this is looking at it for health improve, like optimization.
100%. I mean, to me, cannabis is just a general wellness tool for everyone. You don't have to be chronically sick to be able to benefit from it. As we've learned, there's so many different ways it helps. You gave the example of menstruation, like all sorts of things. So it's just silly that here in the state of Florida, you know, I have to medically, we have to say, oh, we have this chronic illness and that's why we need this, you know.
Yeah.
It should be available to everyone.
Right. It's
And
you
no
know,
one should be testing for it.
right. And they're making these policies. It's like, why do I have to come to you and make us find some reason? It's like, this is a plant. It's been here on this earth with humans and animals. It was actually here before we were, actually. So like, who the people, I'd like to meet the people that thought that, like, had the freaking audacity to put it in a cage and take it away from like humans and animals and everybody that had been using it all up until that time. Like, our animals used to eat hemp all the time. It completely changed the profile of even animals, right? Like it so many biological systems evolved with the cannabis and hemp plant. Like, the balls to freaking lock it up and take it away from everybody. Like, what on earth? But I think that that's actually turning around now, because it was just such a failed attempt at, like, I mean, it's kind of, yeah, but I mean, it's the power that they have. And I think the pandemic actually helped with that, because I think people now are like, who is making these freaking rules? Like, people that weren't paying attention before, after that, were like, what? Like, hold on, who is deciding these things for me? Because I think up until then, a lot of people weren't paying attention, but like, literally the COVID thing took pages out of the playbook that with cannabis, like what they, you know, how they threatened doctors, and they did, you know, they were implementing these policies and they were doing these things. And it's like, we'd seen it all before with what they did with cannabis, which, and I think now, you know, now maybe some people in today that never really paid attention to that before were like, I'm just going to watch this a little closer than I have been, because this is not like making a lot of sense.
Well, I wanted to ask you before we end our interview, tell us a little bit about Train with Mary Jane and your podcast series.
Oh yeah, for sure. So Train with Mary Jane is about the NFL project. So what I wanted to do, because it's got so many components to the clinical trial, I wanted the podcast series to basically have all of the research team members on it, and to sort of talk about what they do and how they're contributing to the clinical trial. So each episode is just, I mean, it's not my podcast. It's with Curious About Cannabis with Jason Wilson. Because I do not have the tech capabilities or the capacity. You guys rock because you can do it. I definitely could not. So
we're winging it and figuring it out as we go.
You're doing a pretty good job. But yeah, I definitely don't have the tech ability to do that. But what we wanted to do was really, because I want people to understand and to know that there is good science happening with cannabis. You know, like, we are trying to publish data so that we can progress it. And for me, I am really for the people. Like, I want people to be involved with it. I think that research should be glass walls. Like, I think everybody should be able to know what's going on in there. And most people, like, you know, research seems to be like, so there's a gap between the real world and research. And so what I wanted to do was bridge the gap and, you know, bring people sort of into research and just sort of talk about what we're doing in there and what we're finding. And so so that was the idea for the podcast, was so that we can talk about, you know, the things that we're doing and interview the people that are working on the research. So we've had my supervisor, who's a concussion specialist. He was on a couple weeks, well, maybe a month ago. And then today, actually, we just did one too with Robert LaPrairie, who is on my committee. And he is he's really a cannabinoid pharmacologist, but he specializes in new drug design and looking at the mechanisms and stuff. So it's just to teach people, because I don't think that education should be behind a wall either. I think that I don't think it should cost people thousands of dollars to learn something. And I think podcasts are great that way. People can learn for free. If they're interested, they can learn. I mean, I've learned so much from podcasts myself, just listening to other people talk. It's like, I think it's a great way for education. And so Train with Mary Jane, the whole thing, the website or whatever, was just to sort of post stuff about our research and what's going on. And yeah.
That's awesome. I love listening to people talk about the science behind it, because then, you know, I like to learn more and more, because people think, oh, you just want to get high. I was like, no, actually, there's all these things I've learned about it, because this journey, like I struggled myself because I came to using cannabis recreationally when I was young, right? You know, that's how I got introduced to it recreationally. But as I grew older, I saw how it helped me in so many other ways. And I've been using it more medicinally. Obviously, sometimes we have fun and we may,
Yeah.
you know, use cannabis to get high, but that's where I think people get confused because they're like, oh, then you're abusing it if you're doing that. But it's not the same thing. And it's just the more and more I learn and we have these conversations, I think people get where we're coming from. Like cannabis use disorder, like,
Yeah.
is that a thing?
Yeah, you know what? We argue about that. We argue about that all the time because that, you know, when you look at, so that's in the DSM-5, right? And so when you look at, okay, the technical qualifications for cannabis use disorder, whatever, you have to have 2 of the 9 or 11, whatever, in the last 12 months. But it doesn't actually quantify, like a medical cannabis patient that was truly using cannabis for, say, anxiety would qualify as cannabis use disorder. That's not a cannabis use disorder person, but based on what you have written out as the qualifications. So it's like that's flawed. And so there are a lot of conversations about how that is flawed because it really comes down to intention. And so even, you know, when you want to use it to get high, well, that's your intention. So that's what you wanted to do. So that's not a disorder. That's literally an intention. That's why I'm using it, the same way why people go out and drink at night because they want to have a good time. It's the intention, right? And when people are using it medicinally, they're intending to use it for medicinal purposes. And so I think the line between like medicinal and recreational, like that's a very blurred line. It's, you know, we all use it for whatever. Why do we have to put it in a box? Like, why do we have to title it something? It's like, we just want to use it for whatever reason, right? And so, but for my message, even to the athletes or to their trainers and doctors, is it's to teach people that want to use it, how to use it optimally and intentionally. If they intend to use it, we should be able to provide them with support and the education and not stigma so that they can do that intentionally. And they made a choice, they want to do that because I think that they should have the right to choose what medication works best for them, because the patient at the end of the day is the person that has to live in that body. And if cannabis is the thing that they choose that works for them, then that should be an equal option choice than any of the other 500 pharmaceuticals that you were about to suggest for them to take. It should be, if that's what they want to take, then you should be able to help them do that. And I think athletes are a population, they do like to use cannabis, they want to use cannabis, and I think that we need to give them the information and the education to do that.
100%. And we're going to just keep having these conversations so people hear it. Say it loud and proud.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
Well,
Thanks so
thank
much
you
for talking
so
to us
much.
today.
Yeah, I learned
We
a lot. Thank
appreciate
you so
you.
much for joining us and telling us about your clinical trial. And we know our audience is going to really enjoy this conversation.
Thanks you guys so much for having me on, and keep doing what you're doing. I love your podcast. You guys are hilarious. Sometimes I'm laughing so hard. My husband's like, "What are you laughing at?" I'm like, "Never mind."
Thanks.
Okay, thanks guys.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
And that was our interview with Liz Thompson. Oh my God.
And that was our interview with Liz Thompson.
I know. Now it's just, we're not going
I'm
to
sorry,
get it right.
Jesse. And that was our interview with Liz Thompson. That was such a great conversation. I always knew that cannabis was therapeutic, and this is just re-solidifying every conversation we have with different people.
Right.
Re-solidifying that, yes, this can help so many people in so many different ways. And, you know, Ricky Williams had it right.
Right.
You know, he was smoking weed. He almost got kicked
He's
out of the
still
league for
smoking
it.
weed.
Now he's in the weed industry.
Exactly. I mean, if it's anywhere where he was going to go, it was there.
Yeah, so it was really interesting to hear the perspective of how cannabinoids can be therapeutic in contact sports, the different ways it can help athletes, and especially like all the, like we were saying earlier before we came in to the interview, all the red tape, all the restrictions, how
Right.
difficult it is to do this kind of research.
I mean, clinical research in and of itself is very difficult to do because of all of the different, you know, everything involves protocols,
yeah.
and just keeping track of everybody's, you know, what their regimen is, and, you know, being as accurate as possible. especially with humans, you can't like lock them up and watch them like they're rats. Like you have
No.
to let them live their life.
Mhm.
So it can get a little complicated. But if you're interested in checking out Liz Thompson and what she's doing, you could follow her at trainwith.maryjane on Instagram. Or you can visit her website, maryjaneathletics.com, so you could follow her and her research journey. We hope you enjoyed this interview and our show. Please rate, review, subscribe, and follow up with us next Wednesday.
See you next week, guys. Bye.